Is up? What is up? Welcome everyone to DM Paints. As you can see, I am in a different space here. I have spent the last couple of weeks getting ready for my move, so I'm in a new space, setting up. I know it sounds a little echoey, it's because it's not fully finished in here, but when it is, I definitely want to do a studio tour for you where I edit all of my videos as well as create my art. So that's going to be very exciting. But for today, we're actually going to be taking a look at a piece that I finished that is going to be in the same series as Divine right over here. And this is going to be also available at dmpaints.ca this week, so make sure to stay tuned for that. We're gonna be having a look at this digital time lapse together, the types of brushes that I use, the effects that I applied, as well as my thought process throughout this entire project. So I hope you enjoy that, and let's get into it. This freaking records, because if not, and it sounds like I'm gonna have to do it again. So let's get it started. Let us open up this time lapse, and I'm seeing it for the first time with you. Let's have a look at what I've created. For this time lapse, I wanted to have something that was very similar to Divine. Initially, I wanted to actually put these two pieces out together, but honestly, they just took very long. So I put them out when I can put them out. There's nothing else I can say. But I did want to keep these same elements. I wanted to have a figure, and I wanted it to be statue-like. So this is what I'm doing here. I am just kind of experimenting. That is what I do initially. I sketch things out in different layers, and then I just see the overall vibe. So I don't necessarily finish one part of my drawing and then move on to the other thing. I'm kind of working always along the way with what it is exactly that I want my vision to be. So if I want certain designs or certain things to flow a certain way, I have to make sure that I can see that vision from the beginning so I can properly build on it. I hope that makes sense, but this is kind of my thought pattern when I'm creating these things, especially because I'm mixing a sort of more realistic drawing with something that's a little bit more abstract. Having those things mesh together and understanding how they're gonna look from the beginning, I find is very crucial. So as you can see, I am using a reference, which again, I always recommend that you use references. I talked about that in my other videos when I'm doing my digital illustrations. I think it's very important. You might think that you're on the right track or know how to shade a certain area or add highlights, etc., even in terms of proportion, but it's always best to just have something to reference. In this case, I was referencing it for the pose as well as the lights and shadows, just to make sure that I was kind of, you know, on the right track there. So initially I wanted to keep the yellow mustardy background that I had in Divine, but I also wanted to change it up. So you're gonna see me kind of go change the background a few times within the course of this time lapse. And those squiggly lines that I put kind of coming throughout her legs and all of that, I just wanted it to indicate movement. And I wanted to indicate like this overall flow in the piece, if that makes sense. Brighten it up a little, make it a little bit lively. There's a lot of things I did to experiment in terms of the abstract part of this painting that I didn't really keep. But what I did keep is this part where I made it look like things were sprouting out of her and growing out of her, and this was kind of inspired by the word prompt in Inktober, sprout. So that's actually something that helped to liven this painting a lot. So I'd created the painting before Inktober, or I started creating it, and then I finished it as that word gave me inspiration to continue on this piece, because I was gonna do a whole other piece with that word, and I thought that it would actually fit perfectly here, so I'm glad that I did that. So I opened up the bottom of her legs as well as I cut her stomach in half, to just kind of show that she's like this statue. She can be broken, but also she has this life coming out of her. So you're gonna see the patterns that sprout out of her legs as well as her stomach area. And that's where the abstract bit comes in. And I've also added the cracks that I added to Divine, and I also added to the warrior print that I have out on my website. I don't know what it is with this fascination about the statues and the cracks in the skin, like almost just to make them look stiff like objects, but then this liveliness to them. I don't know what it is, but I'll probably make a few more like this. So here I'm actually experimenting with a textured paintbrush just to kind of see how she would look like in that statue stone effect, but I'm gonna actually do the good copy of that at the very, very end. And there I've just duplicated the entire layer of all of the patterns that you see, and then I shifted them over and made them dark like the background just to indicate that there's shadow. So I actually ended up making these abstract bits, almost 3D, almost popping out, and you can see them on her skin as opposed to just this flat layer. So it gives it a lot more depth and dimension. What I found about the background, the reason I added those subway looking tiles, which I just took like a thin pen, I can't remember what I went in with, just like any sort of pen. I made it super thin and I turned down the opacity. I just wanted to give it a little bit more interest in the background because I found it was a tiny bit too plain, but very, very subtle, nothing crazy there. And at the end, as I've kind of got a lot of my vibe figured out, the placement of the abstract bit, where the things are sprouting out of her body and so on, I then go back and focus on the details of the body. So there wasn't a lot of definition initially around the butt cheeks. I'm going in and doing that there and kind of just doing whatever feels right in this moment and having an idea in my head of where the light source is coming from. So I'm no longer following the reference here. And I might go in at the very end after having showed you guys this and play around with the saturation of the actual body. I don't know if I want to make it warmer or colder like a statue just yet before I post it as a print. But this is the majority of the process. The two little spray paint bits, I used a spray paint brush for that. So you can find that in the spray paint section of Procreate. I'll add it in here for you. And then it was on the color mode add. So there's a video where I talk a little bit about color settings and I'll link that up here. And I just added my signature as like a little spray paint on her body. I'm experimenting a little bit with smudging her body like I did in Divine, but I think I might leave that out just because this piece is already fairly busy on its own. And throughout the entire layer, I kept just darkening also the cracks because I found that I was always covering them. And that's just because when you work with larger files, you don't have as many layers to work with. So I didn't have a separate layers just for the cracks on her body. So I'd always go in after I was kind of finished up a layer and darken those bits. And then I'm just adding in some darker pieces here. By the way, I am using the wet acrylic paintbrush for like 90% of this piece, not including the abstract bits like the things that are sprouting out of her legs. I believe I used a custom brush for that. I'll include that here just now. And yeah, wet acrylic is what I use. So you can find that in the painting section on Procreate. So this is it for now. This is what I have so far. I have not named this piece yet, so if you have any suggestions, I definitely love for you to leave that down in the comments below. Again, I might be adding some sort of things to this, but it is definitely gonna drop this week. You might wanna follow me on Instagram for some updates at _dmpaints, and I will see you next time for another video. Peace.